Metal Roofing University with Adam and Mason.
Welcome to another episode of Metal Roofing University. I'm your host, Adam Clark, and my co-host, as always, Mason Burchett.
Hey, how are we doing?
Mason, how's it going, man?
Good, yeah, it's been a while, and we say that every podcast, but it's been a while again.
We're trying our hardest.
It's gonna be back. It's a busy season in the metal roofing world, and we've been busy selling these fantastic metal roofs. But it is good to be back on the podcast. Got some cool stuff to talk about today.
We look a little bit different if you're watching us on the screen.
Oh, what's going on?
Yeah.
Whoa, look at that background there. Look at that backdrop.
So we've
Classy.
got a new backdrop, and that's something that we always like to incorporate in our Metal Roofing University videos that we do. And so we're fortunate to partner with Sherwin-Williams as our coated coil provider. And
Shout out to Jason.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. They partnered with us on this backdrop, and you can see they're represented, but we also have Metal Roofing University represented and United Steel represented. We appreciate our partnership with United Steel Supply, and so we're going to give them a little bit of love on the backdrop as well. And we actually partnered with SCS Image Group.
Wow, Adam, we're running a podcast here. If you could mute your phone, that would be fantastic.
We actually partnered with SCS Image Group and Brian Vela, the president there.
Brian's the man.
Yeah, so we actually used to work with Brian in the steel world, and he's actually gone into the marketing and display world. And
so I still get to work with Brian.
You get to work with him, but he's still my contact. Well, why don't you talk a little bit about the work we've done with Brian to get the backdrop here, and just a little shout out to him.
Yeah, Brian's got a really cool thing going on at SCS Image Group, and he actually told me they're about to revamp the website. So for anybody that's listening that runs a business, let me go check out SCS Image Group and their website. And if you got any marketing needs as far as trade show, booth, setup kind of stuff like this backdrop, these tablecloths, brochures, T-shirts, they've got all that kind of stuff, and they're awesome to work with. They make sure they get it right. So give them a little love.
Well, enough with the plugs.
And enough with the shameless plugs. Let's get down to business.
Let's get right down to it. So most people know that we are a metal roof manufacturer and supplier. Our core business is primarily focused to consumers, so consumer direct selling. And we really find that educating our customers and educating our partners has always served a really great purpose for Best Buy Metals. Not only are we able to create confidence with our customers with the parts that we manufacture, but because we've been able to establish this confidence as being an industry leader, a lot of the component parts that we offer as well, we're able to purchase and distribute high quality, high value components. And today we're going to be talking about underlayment.
Underlayment, yeah. That's a part of maybe not a lot of end consumers are thinking about, because it's not visible after the roof's installed. But it's actually a pretty important part of the roofing process, specifically to metal roofing if you're doing a roof over on an existing roof.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of different underlayment options that you can choose from. We have people knocking on our doors every single day trying to promote a type of underlayment, and that's been great because it's allowed us to vet and select the best options that are out there on the market. And we're going to talk about a couple options and even a couple variations to traditional underlayment that are now available that maybe weren't available 15 or 20 years ago. So Mason, let's start off with maybe the one that's most unique, I think, to itself is the lathing boards. And so when we talk about underlayment, a lot of people may think about like felt paper or synthetic underlayment, but we use 1x4 lathing boards and we sell them pretty regularly as an underlayment. Talk a little bit about why that is an attractive product to use as an underlayment.
Yeah, so there's a couple of reasons, a couple of factors that would play into your choice of underlayment or barrier between the roof deck and your metal roofing panels. Lathing boards or 1x4s typically are what is used for that. Some people go whole hog and use a 2x4, but the idea behind 1x4s is it's great for an existing roof deck that maybe does not have a planar surface. It's a non-planar surface. It's warped a little bit. It's aged, and so it's if you install panels directly on top of the roof deck, you might see some of those imperfections, some of those waves in that substrate. 1x4s help make things planar. It helps make things level. and then you can install the panels on top of the 1x4s, and it really eliminates the majority of those imperfections that you might otherwise see if you just threw felt down and went on top of it.
Yeah, and with traditional asphalt shingles, sometimes you don't see the slight dips or valleys in the roof because it's not glossy. It doesn't have the same type of finish as a metal roof might have. So that's something to really take into consideration when you're preparing to install a metal roof. A lot of times the best way to test that is just to run a line or run a string from one end of the roof to the other at various locations up the actual roof, and you'll be able to see if you have any dips or any valleys. And that would be an important time to go ahead and start to establish some shims and then run some of the 1x4s across to get a flat surface to put the panels down on the roof, because that does make a pretty big difference. Another thing that I like about the 1x4s is that they actually create a higher level of insulation,
Right.
because you're creating a greater distance or gap between the bottom of the panels and the roof, whether it's decking or shingles that you're going down on top of. So there's actually an insulating factor that goes into the 1x4s as well. So not only can it help level a roof, but it can actually give you greater insulation.
It's the same principle of mom telling you to layer up when you go outside. The more layers you've got, the more air gaps you have between the body and the outside. Same kind of principle. You got an air gap there between the interior of the home and the outside of the panel.
You've been watching A Christmas Story?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite movies. Yeah. But so yeah, that's some of the reasons you might select 1x4s, Adam. There's other options as well, and a lot of people say, "Yeah, I need some felt paper." So talk a little bit about what purpose does felt paper play these days, and maybe what are some of the modern alternatives?
Yeah, so felt paper, again, 15, 20 years ago, would have been considered the standard. It would have been considered the normal underlayment, whether it's a 15-pound, a 30-pound. You can even get 60 and 90-pound felt paper, but the 30-pound felt was pretty commonly used back before the synthetic underlayments really became the norm or became the standard. Some of the reasons that there was this innovation or this advancement beyond felt paper is that, well, felt paper did serve a purpose. It was relatively inexpensive to make. What we have found, especially with metal roof applications, because a characteristic of metal roofing is it can sweat a little bit, and that's fine. It's normal. It's not going to cause any problems. But the moisture beads were going down into the felt paper, which actually contained oil. The oil was what kept the felt paper from drying out. Well, anyone who remembers their high school science class remembers that oil is less dense than water. So when the water would go into the felt paper, it would force the oil out. And then when the water evaporated, the oil typically did not drop back into the paper. The paper typically started to dry out, to crack, to become brittle, and to basically fail before the roofing system failed. So there was obviously a huge need for innovation with that product. And while there was still a cost advantage for a number of years, what we have found over the last 5 years or so is that because felt paper is becoming so readily available, I think it was figured out pretty quickly that it's not that hard to make. That's why there's so many manufacturers out there. From a cost standpoint, it's actually just as affordable as felt paper now.
Synthetic, that is.
Synthetic, yeah. Synthetic is just as affordable as felt paper. We actually stopped carrying felt paper probably 3 years ago, just because we buy a truckload of it and then we'd sit on a truckload of it. I mean, it was almost impossible to move it because of the price advantage and the install advantage of the synthetic underlayment. Maybe you can talk about, from an install standpoint, even just a handling standpoint, the advantages of the synthetic underlayment.
Yeah, there's multiple advantages. Like you said, the price point to me is it's a no-brainer because you're paying just about the same amount for a synthetic these days. The other advantages would be felt paper typically came in like a 2-square roll, 200 square foot in a roll, and it's pretty heavy. Like you said, it's basically just paper dipped in oil, so it's a little weighty for a 2-square roll. Not that bad, but
I mean it's 50 pounds.
Yeah, it's enough. So you have to have a lot of rolls to accomplish covering an entire roof deck. Synthetic underlayment is typically 10-square roll, right? So you've got 1,000 square feet in a single roll that is actually probably a little smaller in diameter than a typical roll of felt paper is. So you get a lot more coverage out of a single roll. It also holds up better. It's just a better product. So if you're in a situation where maybe you're doing a new construction and the roof is going to remain uncovered for a week, a period 7 to 10 days, synthetic underlayment, depending on what style it is, what it's made of, what brand, can actually usually be left out on an open roof deck for 30 days, sometimes up to 6 months, depending on the rating of that underlayment. So synthetic underlayment allows you a lot more flexibility on the install. You don't have to rush. I mean, if you get rain on felt paper, it's pretty much done. It's done.
Yeah.
Also does not stand up very well to wind uplift. So, if it's windy, it'll tear easily.
Yep.
Synthetic underlayment does not tear. Another advantage that it has over felt paper, Adam, is a lot of synthetic underlayments actually self-seal around punctures. So when you puncture it with a roofing tack or a cap nail or whatever it is you're using, it'll seal around that, and so water won't really get around the shaft of that screw or that nail.
And because synthetic underlayments are typically a woven polymer, they're semi breathable. So they've got basically this they're not permeable. I mean, you're not getting moisture coming through, but the bottom side of the underlayment actually allows air to move and to circulate up through the material, which again can help with insulation. It can also help with drying out any moisture that does get under the panels or on the insulation. So that's a huge advantage. Another thing that a lot of people don't talk about, but felt paper can be really slick when it gets wet. Again, you got the oil coming up from the material when it gets wet, and when you're walking around on that, you're walking on a slick surface. And some felt paper or some synthetic underlayments can have a similar tendency, but there's actually some synthetic underlayments out there that are specifically designed to resist that slippery surface. They'll have like these beads or this texture on it, where if you're installing in a light rain or a mist or a fog, any moisture that gets on the surface of that, it's really not going to impede your ability to continue on with the install.
Yeah, because you're like, some people might be thinking, well, it's not going to rain. I'm going to put this up today, and then tomorrow we're going to put the roof on. There's no rain in the forecast. You even got to think about the dew point.
Yep.
You wake up in the morning, you got dew on the roof. That's another reason that could be slick. So these are all factors that you've got to think about, and synthetic underlayment solves a lot of that issue. Another big thing that we haven't mentioned yet, Adam, is the fire resistance. God forbid that happen, especially if you're doing a new construction or a roof over or something. But felt paper, man, that thing will light up like a match.
How do you know that?
Because I've lit it up with a match. So it'll light up quick, man. Paper dipped in oil, it's definitely highly flammable. Synthetic underlayment, almost all of the major brands out on the market have a fire resistance. I've seen tests. I have not done this. I can do it right now if you want me to. I'll go find some. Where people are holding up a match and waving it over the synthetic underlayment, and it's not immediately combustible. It's not just bursting into flames.
Yeah.
So it does have that fire resistance value that you're not going to get from felt paper.
And let's go back and talk just for a second on the ability for some of these synthetic underlayments to be installed and exposed to the elements before the final roof is installed, at least for a longer period of time than felt paper. We have a couple of variations, and they're not even really quality. They're just a couple of variations based off of installation and application. We have our Best Buy Metals Roof Commander, which is rated for 30 days, exposed to the elements, fastened with cap nails. And one of the reasons why that's so important right now to put a synthetic underlayment down, and fortunately, Best Buy Metals is not experiencing this, but in the industry, in the building materials world right now, there's a lot of back order materials, whether it be steel or whether it be shingles. So, that's something to keep in mind. If you think that your shingles or if you think that your metal panels are going to deliver the next day and they're back ordered because the supply chain is under such stress, well, guess what? If there's a delay, you have to have some type of safeguard. You have to have some type of security. And the synthetic underlayment really offers that, and that can give you some confidence even with a new construction.
Yeah, that's right. And in addition to that, far beyond the install being complete, God forbid you have a mistake in the install. But that synthetic underlayment gives you just one more barrier of protection if water is to leak in around some flashing or something like that, and you have proper synthetic underlayment rolled out the correct way, it will offer more protection than just a bare roof deck would offer.
I know we've got a few more underlayments to talk about, but since you said, rolled out or installed the correct way, talk a little bit about what's the right way to install synthetic underlayment and what's the wrong way to install it.
Yeah, so we've definitely seen some funky installs with underlayment before, that's for sure. The way you should install underlayment is horizontally, starting from the bottom to the top. So what you don't want to do is install this vertically, like you're doing with panels, and having vertical laps. Because if you do that, and let's say it rains, the water's going to obviously find its way under the lap and onto the roof deck. If you install it from top to bottom and it's underlapped that way, it's gonna be like a little gutter, and the water's gonna run under the lap. So you need to install it from the bottom to the top horizontally, and make sure you get solid runs from left to right. Try not to lap it, somewhere in the middle of the deck, because again, you're going to run into a vertical lap where water could be introduced. So that's the best way to install it.
And most of these synthetic underlayments, one of the reasons why they're so user friendly and DIY friendly is most of them actually have the install pattern printed right on them. They'll show you how much you're supposed to overlap one layer over the other. They'll show you where to put the nails or the fastening pieces within the pattern of the underlayment. So that makes it really easy. You don't have to guess, did I put enough fasteners down, or did I overlap that enough to minimize the exposure to moisture or leaking? So that's something that you can't get with really that easily with felt paper. There may be a few variations out there, but with the synthetic underlayment, printing on this material is really easy to do as well.
Yeah, that's right, and which has been a blessing for us, because we definitely have some of those people that say, hey, my underlayment failed, or my underlayment leaked, and you could go on the job and you see it's upside down, it's vertical, it's diagonal across the roof
Doesn't have
deck.
enough fasteners.
Yeah, well, I didn't know that. Well, it's printed right there. I mean, literally, there's big giant targets and arrows that show run it this way, put the nail here. So, especially for the DIYers out there that need a little more instruction, this is a great option for you guys, because you can just roll this out. It literally tells you exactly where to fasten it.
So we talked about lathing boards, or the lumber 1x4s. We talked about felt paper and the basic synthetic underlayments that are out there. And again, we use our Roof Commander. There's also Palisade and Titanium. Those are a couple of brands that we carry in the maybe the thicker synthetic underlayments that can withstand exposure to the sun and UV for a longer period of time. But there's also a couple other options that are a little more heavy duty, and their applications are different. But let's talk a little bit about the Peel and Stick Ice and Water Shield, the self-adhering underlayments.
Yeah, so the Peel and Stick, and it goes by a bunch of different names: Wind and Water Shield, Ice and Water Shield. A lot of people just call it Peel and Stick underlayment. All achieve the same purpose. And this is something, like you said, it's a heavy-duty membrane kind of material that self-adheres to the roof deck. And this is something that you would want to put in areas where, like they call it Ice and Water Shield, in areas where water could pool up, possibly on the roof, or if you're in an area that is subject to freezing temperatures, where you might have ice damming or snow retention. This allows for protection underneath the panel in the event that water should creep under the panels or under flashing somewhere. This secure, so you would want to install this like in your valleys. You would want to install this on the eaves of the roof, down where the gutters are, all of the areas where there's going to be a lot of water,
a sidewall
concentrated in one place.
Yeah.
This is a great option to flash those areas underneath the panel.
Yeah, and we're talking about using a standard synthetic underlayment on the majority of the roof, and then using the Ice and Water Shield in some of these trouble areas. That's going to be, because it is more expensive, so that's really going to be your most cost-effective way to waterproof your roof and waterproof those trouble areas. Now, that's not saying that you can't cover the entire roof, and you might even create an even greater resistance to leaking if the whole roof is covered in Ice and Water Shield. But it is quite a bit more expensive than the synthetic underlayments. It does take quite a bit longer to install. It's much heavier just because of the thickness and the type of material that it's made of. So that's something to kind of weigh out and keep in mind when you're considering the Ice and Water Shield. And there are a couple systems, like we have a Victorian shingle. It's a very traditional small shingle. It's about 12 inches by 14 inches, and it interlocks together. That's a type of system where there's so many seams that we do want to see Ice and Water Shield applied across the entire roofing system. And that's just something to be informed about. If it's running panels, like our tough rib panel or like a standing seam panel, that may not be necessary because you don't have the same number of seams and the same exposure or potential exposure to a lap or an overlap of panels or shingles that is going to create that type of issue. So just be aware that the ice and water shield is a great option. Its practical application can be on every single roof, but it may not need to cover the entirety of every single roof because it is a little bit cost prohibitive.
Yeah. Okay. So let's pivot here. And I want to ask the question, Adam. This is one of the reasons that underlayment's talked about a lot. I want to ask the question that's been asked to me 487,000 times since I started working in the metal roofing world. Can you put metal roofing over shingles?
Yes. Yes, you can. And we've talked, I think we've even talked about this before, and we're probably going to get some grief, and we're probably going to get people who say, well, those guys are taking shortcuts, or those guys aren't really thinking about the longevity of the roof. We are. That's why we're in the metal roofing world, because we care about a system that lasts a lifetime. Right. So when we're talking about installing an existing metal roof or a roof over existing shingles, there are a couple of things that we think should be done to make sure that that application works the way that the homeowner wants it to work. But yes, absolutely, a metal roof can be installed over existing shingles. One of the very first things that should be done is evaluating the roof and making sure that there are no dips or valleys that are extreme, and making sure that there are no weak spots in the roof that are going to create a problem after the metal roof has been installed. Remember, when the metal's installed, it's one and done. You don't have to think about it anymore. Don't put yourself in a position where you're actually having to go and repair what's underneath the metal because you didn't take the time to just investigate before installing over some shingles.
Yeah, and I want to address the trick question that also gets asked in conjunction with the primary question, can you put metal over shingles? Well, I heard it will void my warranty if I put metal over shingles.
That's false.
It's false, and it's a trick question, and let's just dive into this for just a second. We advocate putting a barrier between your asphalt shingles and your metal roof. That barrier being the 1x4 lathing boards that we've talked about. It can be the synthetic underlayment that we just talked about. You should have something between your asphalt shingles and your metal roof. This is why. Your asphalt shingles are rough. They're made out of asphalt. They've got grit on them. And so metal, once it's installed, as it naturally expands and contracts, as it heats up and cools down, it will shift minimally, right? And over time, as it does that against the rough grit of those shingles, there's a primer on the underside of your panel, similar to the paint coating on the visible side, that can be aggravated, right, from the rough texture of the shingles. And that primer can wear down over time, and you could possibly see an introduction to some white rust or something like that on the other side of the panel that could lead to early degradation. That event probably is not covered by your paint manufacturer, right? Doesn't void the warranty, but that event is probably not covered by the paint manufacturer.
I mean, that's just like saying, don't take sandpaper
and rub it across the panel
to the finished side of your panel. I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about. Use some practicality and some common sense. The metal panel will expand and contract at a faster and larger rate than the asphalt shingles that are underneath them, which is why you get this rubbing and this breakdown of the primer. So it's simple. Put a synthetic underlayment or put some 1x4s on top of the asphalt shingles, create a barrier between the two materials, and you're not going to have any issues with that primer. A couple other things that you do want to make sure that you're doing, and this is going to be, some of it's just aesthetic and it'll look a little bit better, but when you install metal roofing over existing shingles, again, you want to inspect the roof. You want to make sure that the roof is flat and planar and it's not going to have any breakdown from weak spots. The other thing you're going to want to do is take a utility knife and cut your shingles back 6 inches from the edge of the perimeter of the roof. For a couple of reasons, but the main one is you don't want to install a nice new roof and look up underneath the roof, the metal roof, and see asphalt shingles poking up from underneath. It looks silly. It looks ridiculous. So you're going to want to just cut those back, and that's really easy. It takes very, very little time at all. The other thing that will allow you to do is when you install your synthetic underlayment, you can then put an eave trim or a fascia board or a fascia cover up there, and that will actually help ensure that you're going to have a nice flat square surface to get the rest of your trim installed, whether it be your rake trim or even your ridge cap as you're folding and forming your ridge cap in place. You do want to make sure that you are taking that step.
Yeah, and then wrap, once you've cut those back, wrap that fascia with the underlayment.
That's
Let
right.
your underlayment hang over and wrap it up and keep that fascia safe because you don't want that stuff rotting out of there. How much more do we want to talk about underlayment?
And I could talk about underlayment all day long. But
all right, second gear. I'm just kidding.
We probably shouldn't.
Yeah.
I think that the main thing is be comfortable knowing that installing metal roofing over existing shingles is permissible.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that it's not more than 2 layers of shingles, because even though the metal roofing weighs about a quarter of the weight of a traditional 30-year architectural shingle, when you get too many layers of roofing on there, the structure of the roof is not designed to hold that weight. So 1 or 2 layers is probably okay.
Most building codes won't allow that either, more than 2 layers of roofing.
That's right. Yeah. So if that's where you're at and you need to take shingles off at that point in time, okay, then you may have to do that. But going down over existing shingles with a good synthetic underlayment on a roof that's flat and planar is really going to give you the same exact result as installing over decking with the synthetic underlayment, except the shingles actually help insulate because they create another layer of separation between the top side of the panels and the interior of the house. They're also going to help dampen or deaden some of the sound by absorbing vibration. So I love it when people are like, "Oh, you're an idiot because you think it's a good idea to install over asphalt shingles." Well, in the right application, you actually get some additional benefits by installing over the asphalt shingles. Not to mention, you save the tear-off cost. Not to mention, you save putting a material that doesn't break down in a landfill into a landfill. I heard a statistic, and I can't. Someone's gonna have to fact check me on this, but someone told me that 3% of U.S. landfills are made up of asphalt shingles.
Ugh.
That's unbelievable. Wow. That's unbelievable. Well, leave it on your roof. Put a metal roof on top.
Yep.
That's not going to break down. And if your metal roof breaks down, go recycle it because it's 100% recyclable.
And you're going to be really old by the time that happens. So, all right, guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode here. If you like what you're listening to, do me a favor. Stop just listening to this podcast and just do it. Subscribe to the podcast. Hit the subscribe button for us. Helps us out. Go check out the rest of our material at metalroofingu.com. And you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and see some install videos we've been posting up there.
Can you light some felt paper on fire?
Next video, I'm going to light some felt paper on fire, and that'll be very entertaining. I might wrap myself in the felt paper and let you set it on fire.
Yeah, okay.
And also, if you're interested in a new metal roof, you're looking at replacing your roof, or you're doing a new build and need a roof, go to bestbuymetals.com and check us out. We've got information about our underlayments there. You can learn about it there. And
you can buy it on our tool store.
You can buy it on the tool store, shop.bestbuymetals.com. So we got all the answers, guys. Thanks for listening. Download, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.